Morning, everyone. We will be starting in about 5 minutes. We'll start right at the top of the hour. Until then, we'll put you on hold and think about the challenges that you're facing right now in your own sales training arena. We're going to be talking about that at the front of the webinar. We'll see you in a few minutes. As we're waiting for folks to join and for the 11 o'clock start time, those of you who are already on, feel free to enter in some of the challenges that you might be facing into the chat box, and we can make sure that we address those during the conversation today. Okay, we are ready to get started. It's right at 11 o'clock. So welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about how Paycor improves their proficiency by 21%. And they're doing that primarily through knowledge reinforcement. That's on top of their current learning management system. So we're going to go into detail on why that 21% proficiency is really so critical. First of all, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Nancy Nard, and I started Smart Selling Tools about 10 years ago to offer free resources to what I saw as an emerging market, which is really sales technology and how sales technology can help organizations deliver much higher performance and revenue to go along with it. In today's webinar, we are recording this, so I will be sending out a link to everyone by about this time tomorrow, and you can feel free to share that link with your colleagues. Today's guests are Phil Meal. He is the Principal Sales Learning Consultant at Paycor, and Emma Haynes. She's the Senior Change and Process Management Analyst at Paycor. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here because now more than ever, it's important to get the most that we can in terms of performance and effectiveness out of sellers. I'm noticing more and more layoffs on across the board, but also with the sales organization. That means we have to really optimize our sales capacity. And you two have done a great job doing that at Paycor. So this webinar is really going to be about sharing some of those tips and tricks. Before we get started, Phil, I'd like to have you maybe just, both of you actually, but we'll start with you, Phil. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role and perhaps a little bit of background on Paycor.
Sure, absolutely. Again, happy to be here, Nancy and everyone. So as Nancy said, my name is Phil. I have been with Paycor for 8 years now. You can see my title there, but it's a fancy way of saying sales training. So my team and I facilitate and lead all of our new hire sales training, as well as sales training for embedded tenured sellers. We refer to that as continuation training during really their first 24 months at Paycor. I've been doing that for about 6 years, and prior to that, I was a seller here. So I carried the bag and everything that we're training to our new sellers now. For a couple of years, I did that at the onset of my career. You mentioned a little bit about Paycor as well. Paycor is, we refer to it as human capital management, but we've been around since 1990 for 30 years now. We partner with businesses. We refer to it as small and medium-sized businesses, really in the 50 to 1,000 employee space, on any challenges and needs that they have around people management. So payroll, HR, timekeeping, recruiting and hiring, data analytics and reporting, that kind of stuff. Our solutions and our partnership are really geared towards optimizing the employee experience and how businesses manage their workforce.
Terrific. Emma?
Hi guys, so I'm Emma Haynes, and as you saw my title, Senior Change and Process Management Analyst, which is a mouthful, but you know, I think a lot of you guys have probably seen that change and change management has become kind of a new trending thing in the industry, especially in technology, and so my role is essentially to focus solely on our sales organization and make sure that everybody in the sales organization is ready when there's something happening, whether it be a new product release, update, process change, organization change, whatever it may be. My job is to take that back and look at the people side of it. How do we make sure that everybody's ready to go? They understand what's changing, why it's changing, and that they understand the correct information so that they can go utilize it correctly, whether it be talking with prospects or just amongst themselves within the team and working functionally.
And let me just say that Emma's role is vastly more important than mine.
I would argue against that, but.
No.
I'd like to just make a distinction before we get started in terms of what you're really doing. It's not just about onboarding. It's much more. It's about continuous learning and reinforcement to those who may be new, but as for those who are tenured sales reps as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, 100%, Nancy, you're correct. At the heart of what we're talking about today, the way that we employ Qstream is a little bit during that new hire experience, which is for us, it's 8 weeks is that new hire training, namely for salespeople, and then for different roles around the organization, training length varies. But we kind of refer to it as that repeat training program. And you mentioned knowledge reinforcement. Where it really kicks in is in week 9 through month 24. That's where we're really getting the impact that the Qstream can bring for these sellers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, in today's conversation, I want to make sure we hit on 4, and there'll likely be more key points, because these are really at the core of why you've been so successful in increasing proficiency. Point 1 is the fact that you really are focusing in on getting higher and higher engagement in the learning activities with your reps. Another aspect is that you have really focused in on improving the product knowledge recall. So we're going to be talking about how you did that and why that's so important. And also this concept about mitigating the forgetting curve. This is becoming more and more of a familiar terminology, especially for sales enablement folks. We know that it's hard for people to remember a lot of information that is being shared with them. And unless it's continuously reinforced, this curse of the forgetting curve tends to kick in. So we'll also talk about how you mitigated that. And then the last thing, which is really important, is about how to quantify learning ROI. And for those of you listening, if you can understand how to do that, then that's going to really help you to figure out how to get budgets approved for these types of activities. and also to know what to look for in terms of measurement. So we're going to kind of focus in on those, but there'll be a lot more points. Let's start with talking about the challenges that you two have faced. And I'm sure this looks very familiar probably to everyone. I started out by asking folks what their challenges were. I'm sure if they thought about it, they would have thought about a number of these that are on this list. It's not an exhaustive list, but these are really some of the key ones that you were looking to solve. Why don't we have you, take us through just a handful of these. And Phil, maybe we'll start with you with the first bullet point.
Sure, absolutely. So just for the context, we joined and partnered with Qstream in 2016. So it's been about 4.5 years or so. And at the time, our new hire sales training program was really the only sales training program. It's had different iterations and different lengths, whether it was 4 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, as Emma well knows. Currently it's 8 weeks, but that was it as far as sales training. So there was no continuing education, continuing learning or knowledge reinforcement or anything like that post new hire training. So we felt that our sales reps were relatively fairly engaged in the new hire sales training. We have sales reps in 33 states. We have clients in all 50 states. And once they were done with that new hire training, as we all well know, the fact that they're salespeople aside, adults probably only retain 15 to 20% of what you tell them anyway, and then throw in the fact that as much as we love them and we dear them, they're salespeople, it's probably even less than that. So they travel back to Colorado or they travel back to Boston or wherever it is, and we had no real way of knowing, okay, are they continued to be engaged in everything that we've taught them over these 8 weeks or whatever sales training was, whether it's sales process, best practices, product knowledge, how to position product, how to leverage referral partners, everything that we do to ultimately serve our clients. There was no way to measure that. There was no way to know that. And we had no real means to reach them in remote areas of the country and do that. And so Qstream really came at the onset, okay, once new hire training is done, we need something that's fun, that's productive, that salespeople can potentially compete in and that we can gamify, and that we can reach sellers all around the country to continue that knowledge reinforcement and continue that learning. One of the, to put a bow on this thought, one of the key indicators of that is at the time we were having a lot of new clients, I call it registering tickets, but calling their customer support rep, we have a dedicated customer support rep, and having some sort of functionality problem or issue or questions, or the implementation didn't go as smoothly as it could have. And one of the things we started thinking was, are our salespeople remembering what we taught them in training, positioning this properly? And so that's one of the initial kind of challenges we decided to tackle to engage them.
Okay, that makes sense. Emma, why don't you take us through a little bit about the reinforcing the knowledge and how that was a challenge? Phil, you kind of hit on that, but to be clear, you have a learning management solution, but as I understand it, was being used and perhaps still is today for kind of the initial, maybe bigger chunks of learning. And it became clear that because of the forgetting curves and some of the things Phil just talked about, that this ongoing reinforcement was more and more important.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And we still, as you said, today use our LMS system to kind of roll out the core learnings, if you will, when something's new, or with onboarding things, this is where you're getting most of your details from, is going to be in our LMS. And then, we kind of looked back and said, well, we just threw a lot at sellers, and especially kind of hitting on that high demand for sellers to adapt, right? Especially with technology, things are changing constantly. There are product updates all the time. There are new taxes that come into play, right? Or legislations and things like that are hitting that they need to know. And especially right now, right, with being basically forced to work all virtual, so trying to keep up with all of those changes and having a lot of it all at the same time. We want to make sure that, we're reinforcing everything that we just did and that we just went through, right? So it's not like, here, one off, you're done. Hope you remember, and that wasn't too much for you and it wasn't too overwhelming. Now we have the opportunity when using Qstream to go back and say, hey, remember when we hit on this a couple of months ago or a couple weeks ago? You're going to be quizzed on it with a couple questions, and it's fun, right? And they like it. They were familiar with it because most of them used it within their onboarding training. So it's a tool they recognize. And we use it as a way to basically validate that they, not only attended the training, but also retained the information that we provided for them. So we use it a lot recently with our product knowledge, particularly. So whenever we have a product release, we'll put together a short couple week campaign with Qstream, right, where we send it out to everybody and, have a couple kind of deep questions, if you will, a little bit harder than maybe even the training, make sure they went in and read the material that had the full details on the product updates and things like that, and competitive intel, all that good stuff. And so they have to go in and answer questions on that, and they get scored, right? And if they don't get it right, and so we can track how people are actually retaining our information and reinforcing that later on. So it's been really great.
And you mentioned the gamification. I would imagine that just makes it a little more exciting. That, sales
Oh, yeah.
centers are very competitive as it is. And so, yeah, if I'm going to need to do some exercises, it might as well be fun. I might as well be able to earn some points. I might as well be able to compete against other sellers.
Yes.
How have the sellers reacted to that aspect of it?
Oh, they love leaderboards, right, Phil? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Phil used to always send out fun leaderboards with everything on it, and and they would show who's at the top, and we'd celebrate whoever was in the lead. And so, yeah, competition is the best way that we found to get people excited, just to say like, hey, even if it's just your name is being highlighted in something in a communication to the rest of the organization, people love that. And so giving them the opportunity to get that spotlight, especially in front of leadership, is huge. So they really, really engage when it's a gamification aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Did you have something you wanted to add, Phil?
No, 100%. Emma's correct. The salespeople we hire, I'm sure you can make this kind of, I don't want to call it a stereotype, but hyper competitive beasts is what I would call it. And if you can show a leaderboard, get them competitive about it. In a lot of cases, we, as part of our learning budget, tie financial incentives to winning or completing or that kind of stuff, these Q streams. Then all of a sudden, not only is it fun and engaging and competitive, but I can get paid to complete this. Absolutely. I'm going to go through and do the best I can and try and learn.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we've already heard some great tips in terms of how to get sellers to engage and how to reinforce a knowledge post-training. Some of the other challenges, and these will come out, we can discuss them more as we go through some of these other slides, but just the ability to have some real-time data into what do reps actually know? What level are they at? And where are their learning gaps and knowledge gaps that we need to reinforce? It's difficult to get that kind of data, or impossible if you don't have a system to get it. So that's another thing that Qstream can help with. And so if those of you listening are struggling with really being able to understand how to better coach your reps and how to understand who needs that coaching, then having real-time data would be really critical. And then a few of the other challenges that I know that you two had said were critical for you to overcome really was just helping to keep reps be productive in the field. And now pretty much everyone's in the field because they're all working from home. So that's super important now than ever. A high demand for sellers to adapt. Again, changing world. So sellers, I imagine you're probably putting in some new programs and some new messaging and positioning. Everyone out there is doing that. So how are you communicating that to your reps and helping them adapt to these changing times? And then the last challenge that I know you had mentioned was the actionable knowledge. You want to talk about that? What does that mean specifically? Phil, Emma?
Sure. I'll chime in on that a little bit. So when anything that we put into Qstream for sellers or sales leaders for that matter, we want it to be something that they have the ability to put into action with clients, with partners, et cetera. You're still hearing me, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And so whether it's product knowledge, Emma mentioned that, whether it is something sales process related, or how we move a prospect from a first time appointment into what we refer to as a needs analysis, or how we demo our software, best practices. The main application of Qstream being competitive and fun, but Q&A based, right? We're asking them questions in multiple choice or true false fashion. It's one thing to just have the knowledge, but it needs to be knowledge that they're actually using in the field and is what Em and I would refer to field relevant. Number one, they're probably more likely to pay attention to it if they know this is knowledge they're going to use and is going to help them sell and be successful. And then number two, just going to Paycor's growth and profitability and all of our goals, everything we push to them, you answer a question, you read through the explanation of it, and it's like, okay, now I understand what I would do in this situation, or what challenge this product solves for an HR director, or whatever the case is. And that can be turned into a prospecting script or part of their talk track when they're meeting with someone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It makes sense. Thank you. Well, so before we go to the next screen, I just want to kind of sum up in terms of challenges. This is a good slide for you all to kind of keep on hand, because if you can solve these challenges for your own organization, then you are on a path to improve sales proficiency by 21%, or perhaps even more, who knows? So, use this as a checklist. Do we have a good handle on, getting our reps to actually engaged, for reinforcing knowledge, etc.? All right, so then we're going to talk about some of your pain points that you were experiencing. I know you've been using Qstream for a number of years, and that speaks volumes. But think back to before you were using it, right? You had an LMS system. What was life like then? And why did you decide you needed to implement a solution like Qstream? Who wants to go first?
I can start a little bit. So back in 2016, when we started working with Qstream, the LMS we had is very different than the one that we have right now. And it was mainly simply used for stuff during new hire training. So be it e-learnings or different courses or assessments that sellers would take. And that was really it. And so back to that idea of once they were done with new hire training, there was no, and this applies even for non-sales people, once they were done with new hire training, there was nothing in our current LMS or current process that could help repeat or reinforce or reach them again in remote parts of the country or anything like that. And so the pain points we were really experiencing were, okay, if we have a product enhancement, we do every quarter, as Emma mentioned, or something like the Affordable Care Act, ACA, many of you probably know what that is, came out years ago. We have a real problem right now of trying to get that information and, again, actionable knowledge to salespeople in a way that they're going to engage with it, because they just finished new hire training. They have a quota. The last thing they probably want to do is have to sit at home and log into the antiquated LMS we had and take another e-learning about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell, yeah, and I can say from, I mean, I jumped in and we already had Qstream when I joined Paycor. So this was, a little different, but we weren't really utilizing it from beyond the, onboarding phase as heavily. And so really starting to integrate that more into use with our tenured sellers, who are familiar with it still, or maybe not as familiar with it initially, but, integrating that into this, it allowed us to, fully test their knowledge and keep them engaged, right? And be able to kind of tap in, like I said, it's kind of a knowledge check as we go. And so not only is it going to be on things that we just trained on, but it might be a quarterly thing where it's like, hey, we had all these trainings this quarter. Remember all the way back when, a couple months ago, when we had this, remember what it was about? Let's check, And so it's a good way just to kind of tap back in and say, hey, how are you guys doing? How is this being retained? Did you actually understand it? And so integrating that in, even when it comes down to working with tenured sellers who have been in the field, they got it down. I think they got it down. They have a system and schedule. They still need to know the right information when stuff changes. So keeping them on their toes, this is a good tool to do that.
Yeah, and I'll quickly add to that, Emma, that sometimes the messenger is as important as the message. And so we kind of quickly figured out if there's a different medium we can come at our salespeople with to engage them. And I'm sure we're going to get to this, but they can do it via an app and it's fun, then they're more likely to participate in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know that people like quizzes. Right? People like to kind of test themselves. I mean, I think BuzzFeed built a whole $100 million or so business on that kind of concept. And, it makes learning more interesting if you can kind of test yourself, see how you compare to others, see how many you got right and wrong, see how you get better over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of goes back to the gamification side, right?
Yeah.
Who's
and
winning?
Yeah, add to that the gamification. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So how can people recognize or how did you recognize or realize that sales training needed to change? You had sales training for a long time. Most organizations have some type of sales training. What brought about the realization that you really had to do something different?
That's a great question. And I love Emma's perspective on it. I'd probably say a couple things. One, feedback from leadership in the field. So our learning team, sales learning team, and our client services learning team, we're all based here in Cincinnati, Ohio, where our headquarters are. And so we're not in the field every single day. We do get out in the field as much as we can, not now, obviously. We're not in the field every single day with our salespeople. And so feedback from their frontline sales director and their sales VP and that kind of stuff about, hey, this is something my team seems to have a lot of questions about or be lacking in, or we're not doing as good of a job with this product or this process or whatever. That was probably number one, the big one. And then number two, simply the onset of us wanting to do more than just their initial new hire training. The age groups of salespeople we hire vary. Generations can vary. Right now, we've got a group of 20 new salespeople, and ages are probably anywhere from 26 to 55. And so in a lot of cases, the ways that they want to learn can be similar. And in some cases, it could be different. Some salespeople might like sitting down and taking a 30-minute e-learning, whereas some salespeople would prefer something micro-bursted to them for 3 minutes that they can do via an app. And so we wanted to have something that we felt any seller of any background, any age, any environment, whatever, could relate to. And then the simple fact that sales leadership was coming to us, and a lot of this in our CRM tool in Salesforce, we could validate, and sharing challenges that they were having, we kind of looked ourselves in the mirror and said, we're not doing anything to address those challenges. And even if we did talk about it for 2 hours during day 3 of new hire onboarding, it's been 3 months. They have long since forgotten that.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that, right? That, when I think a large part of it too is to be quite frank, we were kind of looking at, why were there not a lot, but why were there some angry or upset clients when we were going into implementation or different phases and looking at no starts or things like that. And so we were wondering, how can we improve, the health of our clients who are going through that process, as well as reduce our no starts. And so we kind of took a look at that and thought, based on what we're seeing, there seems to be kind of a rift in information between what maybe a salesperson had said initially, right, as opposed to what is being communicated during the implementation process or beyond in support. And so there was misunderstanding and confusion on the client side. And that obviously impacted our business largely, right? And so we want to make sure that we're continuing to improve and seeing what we can do for that. And so, we really wanted to take a step back and say, hey, what can we do to make sure that, our sellers are actually saying the right info and that they're not scared, to come and ask for the right information, not just kind of guess on the fly, right? And then, making sure that they have the right information, as fast as they can. And so I think that was a large impact as well, and, help to bridge the gap between those two sections of our company, right? Because obviously there had become a little bit of a rift in that once you kind of look at, they've got kind of animosity between the differing information when you don't know, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we could share a specific example, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, I'll reinforce again, Em and I will reinforce again, the partnership and collaboration between your sales leadership out and about and your sales learning team in this case is absolutely critical, number
Mm-hmm.
one. In 2016, roundabout when we rolled out Qstream, we were in the process of developing our own unified homegrown timekeeping product. The product that we had, we still actually use in some cases, was a very good relationship with third-party integration. And so we took a look at our training program for the new hire sellers, and we said, you know what, we throw so much at them already, it's going to be really tough to weave in how to position, how to ask great questions, how to demo, how to sell a brand new product we're rolling out. And I mean, timekeeping is kind of one of the 5 or 6 core products that we partner with our clients on. And so in that sense, it became, okay, well then once they're done with new hire sales training, if we don't teach them sales process, they're not going to know how to sell this product anyway. So you got to put what's the phrase? Chicken before the cart before the bike, whatever the heck the phrase is. I probably screwed that up. But in either case, so how can we get some of that knowledge to them? Because sellers around the country were, all of a sudden we put all this R&D and product development and money into a new product and we're not selling it. Or at least we're not selling it at the clip we thought we wanted to. And so we took a look at how could we improve that. Qstream was one way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of new products, I mean, often it's the product marketing team's job to train sellers on the new products. And typically it's you get them in a room or you get them all on a conference call and you have them, the sellers sit through a presentation, a deck on the positioning and all of that. And then it's bye-bye, now go do your thing. So I think in general, just this whole concept of reinforcement is key across many different use cases. The thing that caught my attention about what you were saying is that it's not just to help sellers do a better job selling and communicating the product, but it can actually make a difference in terms of customer experience and buyer experience. So when you're thinking about ROI, think about churn. Will it help us reduce churn? Will it help improve adoption of our own solutions by our customers? So there's lots of different ways to use training and reinforcement beyond just pre-sales use case. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit more in terms of what business problems your sales training is solving. Right? So sure, you have some challenges that you wanted to overcome and Qstream is helping you with that. But how does it translate into business problems and business outcomes? Emma, you want to
Absolutely. Yeah, I kind of touched on this a little bit just a second ago where you're talking about, having an overall company goal of reducing our no starts, right? And so, and improving client retention. And that's been a continuous goal. We've had it. I mean, I've been here for, gosh, was it 2 years? I don't remember anymore, but it flies by so fast. But, that's been a goal ever since I've joined, right? And that's constantly going to be that way where we're going to constantly try to improve that. And a huge part of that is making sure that, our sales training is up to date and that our sellers are giving the right information. If you get misinformation right at the start as a prospect, that kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth, right? That they, this isn't what I expected. This isn't, this feels dirty, whatever, even if it's unintentional, that greatly impacts that. And so, looking at that and how sales training can make a difference, right? I mean, we've seen improvements in client retention. And even though it's very high for our industry already within our company, but client retention and no starts have continued to decrease over the past couple of years that I've been here, and in large part, with that sales training, having our sellers ready to go and really fully knowledgeable on what our products can and cannot do, and what kind of support we can offer them.
100%. Yep. And I would add to that, the idea of profitability, cost of acquisition, distance learning is, I don't know if that's an official term or not, I'll call it that. By the way, my wife just yelled down the stairs, it's put the cart before the horse. That's what I screwed up a moment ago. But it'd be those three things. So if you take those one at a time real quick, Emma mentioned actionable knowledge and client retention and reducing no starts. So we sign up someone and ultimately they don't go live. They don't actually process payroll or go live on our software. All of that's extremely important. It's one thing to grow, and Paycor's had 19 straight years of growth. I think the math on that would be 76 or 78 straight quarters of growth, which is great. But at the same time, if growth comes painfully and we're not maximizing our profitability or cost of acquisition, then all we have to constantly do is hire more salespeople and try and sell more. And that's not always the answer. So in Emma's example of no starts, or go back to that perform time example, if salespeople are equipped with actionable knowledge and learn through Qstream how to ask good questions and run a good process with their prospect and position things properly, and then the client goes live and we deliver a strong new client experience, and then that client calls in less, or there's less support tickets, or the implementation takes a few weeks less than it could have, or those types of things don't happen, then all of a sudden, not only did we grow because of a new sale, but the profitability widened as well because there's less cost to maintaining and supporting that new client because from the onset, the salesperson did it the right way. The other big problem is distance learning. So every time we roll out a new product, or we can be a very event-driven industry, HR and payroll, something new, Emma mentioned legislation and compliance and that kind of stuff comes out. We can't fly 200 salespeople back to Cincinnati to do a 2-day boot camp training on it. That wouldn't make any sense. And again, based on some of the stuff we've mentioned, they don't always want to log into the LMS and take a brand new e-learning on it. Plus, in some cases, it can be more costly for us internally to build a brand new e-learning versus create a more engaging, 15, 20 question, microbursted, competitive, gamified Qstream that they can go in, learn what they need to learn. The last thing I would say is you mentioned, Nancy, a slide or two ago, productivity. So we may get to this, but we encourage our sellers to kind of get the juices flowing in their brain early in the morning. You wake up, one of the first things we grab is our phone when we wake up. And so whether it's through Salesforce or CRM, or we encourage the Qstream app, get a few questions answered, learn a few things to get your juices flowing, and then it doesn't disrupt your day. You're not stopping your day at 2 p.m. when you should be customer facing to sit down and take an e-learning.
Mm-hmm. I would say that's key to adoption as well. And probably one of the reasons why you've been using Qstream for so long is because reps use it. And if it was disruptive, that's key. Any technology, if it's disruptive, sellers aren't going to use it. So that's a really good point. And I also caught a few tidbits in there in terms of how to justify and the ROI in terms of reduced customer support costs and those types of things. I am going to, at this point, just remind people that are listening that if you have questions, now's the time. Just pop them into the Q&A box, because we've got Emma and Phil. They're here. They're willing to share their own ideas and their experiences, what they learned. So if you have some questions that I'm not hitting on, feel free to put those in the Q&A box, and we can make this even more interactive. All right, we're going to get into some more specifics in terms of how you're actually using Qstream for sales training. So this is kind of the nuts and bolts. Let's step through a few of these examples here. I don't know if you want to do them all and do them in order, or you want to pick one or two of these. Why don't we start with the first one, right? Okay. So this concept of first presentation for learning. What tell us about that?
Yeah, so Nancy just mentioned adoption, and that is critically important. So one of the things that we like to do during that new hire phase of training is get them familiar with Qstream and using it. And so first presentation, just kind of meaning the very first time that they're instructed to download the app and they're enrolled in a Qstream that's written and designed for new hires. It's a combination of sales process, the verticals, industries, buyers we sell to, product knowledge, basic product knowledge, that kind of stuff. just to get them used to using it. And then that way, when they get into months 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and beyond, it's a tool that they're already familiar with. For the most part, they already like, they're already used to using. And we know that we've hopefully built adoption for the continuing reinforcement that we want to send them.
Okay, that's good advice no matter what technology you're implementing. So think about, how is that new technology first presented to the reps? And do you have a plan to make sure that, you know, there's a good experience throughout the learning journey? Okay. Anything else you want to add on this?
I was gonna say the next bullet point is Emma's baby. She's really good with.
I was ready. Yeah.
Okay, go for it, Emma.
Yeah. No, so you know, pushing that product information out to our sales rep, you know, to kind of reinforce, and it kind of ties in a little bit to the third bullet point as well for reinforcement, right? So we roll out, you know, an extensive product guide, usually quarterly, that says, hey, here are the big, huge, you know, sexy updates that we made to our product that your prospects are going to care about. And it really gets into detail. We go into, you know, here's a use case of, you know, different, which personas are you going to talk to the most about this? What driving questions should you ask to engage in conversation? So it gets really in depth with what kind of information that we can do to prepare sellers to go and talk about this stuff eloquently. And so, you know, we don't necessarily have a formal training where we have them sit down and take time out of their day, you know, because it's just a lot of information. It's a bit overwhelming. And so what we do instead is we have them go through with the Qstream, and we set that up again, same thing. It's first thing in the morning. I put together a bunch of questions, a couple for each update, that just highlights different portions of key things they need to know, right? So it might be something really important, like, hey, we have this update, but it's only applicable for X, Y, and Z companies that have X, Y, and Z number of employees, whatever it may be, something like that, so that they know, you know, knockouts or, you know, key talking points that they need to address. And so we roll that out to help make sure that people know the product information. And so if they studied the guide, it can even be open book, you know, but it still is making them go in and use the resources that we're providing for them to talk about products and see what those updates are to answer the questions correctly. And so it's kind of, you know, hitting on, hey, we're making you use the resources, and also just testing your knowledge as well to make sure you're ready to go out there and talk about this with your prospects.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, so this is some ways that you're using Qstream with the sellers. And one question that popped into my head a few minutes ago, and this is a good time to actually ask you about it, is, you know, what was required to get sales management on board? So let's talk about the ways that you are getting sales managers engaged in the sales training process.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to necessarily say it's mandated. You just do this. You don't have a choice. But it really kind of, for us, starts with the top down. And so I'm sure our sales and marketing organization is probably structured somewhat similar to many others out there, where we have a chief marketing officer and a chief sales officer, and then that trickles down into various VPs, and then frontline sales leadership, and then sellers. And so, number one, we at least the culture of our sales leadership that we have here is they like to feel like they're in control to a degree, and that they're being asked for their opinions, their perspectives on stuff, as opposed to just being forced to do something. And so the very, very first thing at the onset, way back in 2016, was, hey, sales leaders, what are we falling short on? What are the challenges every day you're in there with your reps in the field? What are they experiencing? What are you experiencing? And how can we help you overcome some of those challenges? Because you have 5 or 8 or 10 people that report to you. You might not have the full capacity to do that. So it was really putting the ball in their court, I guess, to a degree. And then from there, it's just, I'll call it extreme, fierce ownership. From the top down, from our chief sales officer down, it was, hey, you all asked for this. You all asked for reinforced knowledge and for help from the learning team. Now you're going to do this. And guess what? You can get it done before 8 a.m. It doesn't need to disrupt your day. You can do it via an app. And oh, by the way, it's fun and it's competitive, and there's a leaderboard and there's incentives tied to it. So I think the tail end of that answer is the messaging. We coached our sales leaders on how to properly message and position this with their salespeople so that they didn't get any pushback. And actually some of that, to take it even further, some of that was coaching we got from Qstream. Hey, how can we position this with our sales leaders, and got their advice from it as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that begs another question, which is, how involved is and was, or do they continue to be involved in terms of Qstream helping you, at the beginning and helping you with adoption and tips and things like that?
Oh yeah, we have a regular meeting with our Qstream representatives who help us out, and we meet up with them. What does it feel like? Once bi-weekly, once a month? It kind of fluctuates depending on calendars, but we do meet up as on a regular cadence, just to check in, even to say, hey, what are you guys using this on? What can we give you some tips as to best ways that we'd recommend doing this, based on the subject matter. And so no, they're really great about making sure that we're in constant contact, and if we have questions, they we'll email them and they get back to us immediately to make sure that we're ready to go. And so they've been extremely supportive.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. That's a huge differentiator, and I would encourage people that are listening, no matter what technology you're considering, is talk to the vendors and ask them questions like, how often do you meet with do you expect to meet with us throughout the year going forward, and how involved will you be in our success? I see on here the real-time visibility into rep knowledge with data for targeted coaching. Now, obviously the more data you have in terms of who needs help and on what, the better coaching you can do. But it also leads me to ask about analytics in general, right? So what learning analytics are you tracking today for your sales training?
Yeah, it's for sales training specifically, it's activity metrics, sold revenue. We don't really necessarily track a ton number of units. It's more cumulative. We refer to it as adjusted net new revenue, whatever term you want to tie to it. Those are the main things. So first time appointments, discovery needs analysis calls, partner appointments, how many phone calls and profiling activities, and in-person cold calls, drops, all that kind of stuff. All top of funnel pipeline developing activity all the way through to net new sales. That's the main analytics that we're metrics that we're tracking for sellers. And so in a sense where Qstream ties into that is we use Salesforce for our CRM tool, and I'm sure many are familiar with Salesforce. And we can take a look into a bunch of different things in Salesforce. One, Qstream is integrated into Salesforce, so you can get to Qstream from Salesforce. So for the sellers that can't keep track of multiple systems or multiple apps, they can just go to Salesforce for it. But then two, we can take a look at activity. We can take a look at sold revenue by product or by region or by vice president or whatever the case is, or by employee band or industry. And we can marry that to, okay, what are the engagement rates? Who completed that Qstream that was about benefit administration? What was the question improvement rates on that? Did it seem like they actually learned something from that? And then does that translate into better activity or more bookings? In the case back in 2016 at Perform Time, for example, it did. It translated into more bookings of the new product, a better understanding of the new product, and then over time, less support needs for that product. And so it's a really cool way to marry your Salesforce and activity data with what you can gain, the insights and analytics out of question improvement and that kind of stuff out of Qstream, and then determine, are we fulfilling the gap we set out to fulfill?
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually have a question on this topic from David. Thank you for the question, David. How different is the data you get from Qstream than the data you get in your LMS system?
That's a good question. So at least from my perspective, when we look at it, from our LMS, it's a lot about completion, and so depending on what kind of material we're rolling out, if it's just an e-learning or something like that, we're able to see what the level of completion that it has percentage wise, right? And who's done it and at what time and how many attempts, things like that. And then we do have the option for assessments as well, and their scores and things like that. So it kind of gives you the immediate, real time. Like I said, we use it a lot for the core announcement of new information more than anything. And so it shows you what immediate things people have learned and that proof that they came and learned, or attempted to learn. But we really don't see the knowledge decay, if you will, or what stuck, what didn't, like we would from Qstream. And so that's kind of a great thing about that, was where we can see as time goes on within campaigns within Qstream, where are we falling off, where are we seeing people not remembering things, even if they've been asked before with the repeat system, right? That, they're, for some reason, first time right after the training they remembered, but then now a couple weeks later it's not sticking, and why? And so is it just not something that's relevant, or so it kind of gives us an opportunity to go back and analyze what we need to do to help reinforce or retrain in some regards on topics.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, and the big thing in there, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the big thing in there is at least from my perspective, topic and question improvement rates, and what seemed to be, so if a seller answered a question incorrectly the first time, but then answered it correctly the next 2 times and then retired the question, okay, so then let's chalk that one off. Hopefully it means they actually learned that. And obviously, when you give the answer to the question, there's free text where you can give something of an explanation to it, and also tie a link in there, or tie another resource in there that they can link out to go review more about that question, that answer, that topic, whatever it is. And so the topic and question improvement rates really give us an indication of, okay, they understand how to position perform time, but the scheduling module, they did poorly on the scheduling module and how businesses do their scheduling for hourly employees. Let's go take a look at the sales and activity around our scheduling. Oh, it's down. Okay, well then maybe we can marry those two together and do something about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. All right, just to do a time check here, we are right up against our 11:45 end time. So I do want to go just a little bit over, because we're getting into, kind of the final really juicy part, which is, we know that, you were able to increase proficiency by 21%. Improvement in proficiency is key, but what and how does that actually translate into ROI? You talked a little bit about the activity metrics. Can you take us through a couple more of these points? Because I think it'll be helpful for people to understand what they can expect and how they can justify a budget for this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's 2 sides to it. There's the hard cost ROI, which can be tougher, but then there's also the opportunity cost, if you will. So I'll start with the opportunity cost. From the top down, when we mentioned that we kind of put it into the ball court of our sales leaders, hey, what challenges are you and your sellers facing, and how can we help you with those? We made it very clear with them, if you're straight with us and we help you with it and we show improvement, as in, I mean, the easiest way to look at it for sales is more activity and or more bookings. Third being less support tickets, less times that product or that client needs to be supported for that because it was positioned right up front. The more we're able to do that, the more likely we are to be able to get budget and get approval to continue helping you with the things that you need and show a positive ROI on the investment we make in Qstream. So there's that kind of opportunity cost. The hard dollar cost, in a sense, is really, I don't want it to not sound insightful, but it's really just looking at, all right, year over year or quarter over quarter or by region, what have we sold more of, whether it was a specific product or a specific bundle, and then the Qstreams that we did to reinforce that, what was the question improvement or topic improvement rates of that? So without going into tons of detail about it, we have a few different bundled offerings that our sellers can sell. And if we're improving on selling the complete and the professional bundles on the HR side, which number one are in a sense more expensive, but they're a higher cost, they're of higher value as well, there's more included in them. Well, then cost of acquisition goes down because the implementation is the same, but there's more revenue from that bundle. And we ran a Qstream on that to help sellers understand how to position that. And there was high question improvement rates, and they did well in that Qstream. Okay, great. Now we increased growth, we sold more, we increased profitability and cost of acquisition. We can take that, and Qstream is one of the tools or aspects that led to that hard dollar ROI. But we can take that and tell sales leadership or tell our board, we're using this tool. Here's what happened in the learning tool. Here's what happened with net new sales. There's a positive hard dollar ROI there. And quarter over quarter, it continues to improve. There's no reason to stop using this.
Mm-hmm. Emma, anything you want to add?
No, I think Phil kind of covered it really nicely.
Okay. There is one question that I do want to fit in. We have a few more, but we probably won't have time for. We'll try to answer those offline. But I thought this was a really important one to address, and that is for those sales reps, let's see how they worded it. How do you keep busy salespeople who are already successful engaged in this kind of training activity?
So, I mean, it's a challenge, right? But I think, you know, a large part of it, again, is that incentivizing. It's a great way to get everybody involved. And this is an easy way to kind of create the game and incentives around it. You know, there's always a good competition, especially when you're a tenured seller that we've seen within our organization to say, like, I've been here the longest and you know, I know what I'm doing, so I'm going to prove it, right? And so, you know, using Qstream is an easy way to have them kind of prove their knowledge, because then we can literally pull it up on a dashboard and then we can see if, you know, they're full of it or if they actually were being, you know, they do know their stuff. And so it's a good way to kind of challenge them as well and keep them on their toes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I would just very briefly add to that kind of leading by example. The engaged, tenured sellers that are already successful, you do have to be selfish with your time to a degree to be a very successful salesperson. But if you lead by example, if you engage yourself in this tool, and the new sellers or sellers that aren't quite as successful are looking up to you and they see you doing that and they see that it helps lead to success, then your whole team's going to succeed. And for what it's worth to you, then your whole team gets to do more happy hours or more fun events, or our salespeople have the option to be stock option holders. So there's all kinds of stuff outside of the commission that you earn that could be tied to you engaging yourself in this learning tool and kind of lifting up all the other sellers around you to do the same.
That's a good point, Phil. I can tell you almost everybody that I've seen who's been highlighted recently in any of our trainings or asked to give best practices as their best seller is fully engaged in learning too. They're always doing it. They're always on time and making sure they're getting stuff done.
Yep.
Well, that was a good question. And like I said, we have a few others. I think what we'll do is we'll list the questions that were not answered along with the answers in the email we send out with the recording. And that way those who have to sign off right now or signed off a little earlier, we'll see those as well. I think the way I want to just end this is to talk about what we'll do is, I think this is also important for people to see, right? How does it kind of work? So we'll send this slide, which basically, you know, kind of illustrates how it works in a mobile scenario, how easy it is for a rep to answer it, to get immediate feedback, to supply things like an explanation. So you get instant reinforcement in terms of why it's a right answer. And then also how you can engage with peers. And then also there's a number of use cases. So you two hit on a few of them, not just sales, but also how it improves and reduces costs from a customer support perspective. So there's a lot of different use case examples here. So we'll be sure to include that in the email as well. And at this point, I'm going to say thank you both so much. You were terrific, and it's quite generous of you to spend the time from your busy schedules to share with our audience all that you've learned, and congratulations on the results you've experienced.
Absolutely. Happy to jump on, Nancy. It was fun.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks. And for all of you out there, have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.